and welcome. Um, Welcome to another Novia One Business School webinar. And this time we're talking about the future of learnerships and qualifications. My name is Marilyn Ramplin. I'm the CEO. And we've picked this topic specifically because we've had so many questions from our stakeholders, from our students, and we really understand that this question and this specific topic we are going to address today is causing a lot of anxiety amongst participants in the market. And therefore, we've organized the session to really try and help you provide some clarity and address some of the pressing issues around learnerships and the future of qualifications. This webinar was really designed around your questions. So we went out and we asked participants for some questions, and we used that as a framework to design something very specific. So we'd like this session to really be an interactive session. As I said, we've got questions, but we really would like you to feel free to ask any questions of our panelists during the session. And while we have prepared this session to sort of guide us, we really want to try and get to the bottom of some of the concerns that you may have. We may not have all the answers for all the questions that you may have, but we're happy to take some of your questions and take them away and see whether we can find answers and then come back to you on some of those. We will try and cover specific topics around qualifications and the CETAs and the future of qualifications and the CETAs. We'll cover the role of the QCTO, that's the Quality Council for Trades and Occupation, in reviewing and replacing these qualifications. And we will also delve into the future of learnerships as well as funding considerations of learnerships, and also the integration of practical hands-on learning experiences and what this means for organizations, but also for students at the same time. We'll also touch upon the implementation of the ISA a little bit so you can get a sense of what the ISA is about if you're completely new to it, and how changes in the qualification landscape may actually impact on this from an assessment perspective. Our aim is really to try and provide you with valuable information and some guidance to navigate the evolving landscape that we all find ourselves in. And there's a lot of uncertainty, and we understand that this uncertainty surrounding these topics can be very challenging. And we hope that this webinar will really try and help to answer some of those questions, to try and alleviate some of the anxiety, and to provide clarity on moving forward. And as I said, we may not have all the answers, but if you pose your questions and we can't give you a definitive answer, we'll try and find the answer from the network that we have. To unpack this session, I'm joined by three very esteemed ladies, and I'm sure some of you have met them and know them, and they have extensive experience within the education field. The first one is Charmaine Janish, and Charmaine is an education training and development practitioner and also a member of the Novia One team. And Charmaine brings a wealth of knowledge and experience to the table, with a previous role as the head of quality management for Bank CETA. And she also has more than 25 years in the education space. So Charmaine is well versed in designing and implementing effective learning programs, sort of understanding our industries. And I'm really hoping that we can lean on Charmaine and her experience today as well. Anna-Marie Lotter is a facilitator and a subject matter expert for Novia One. She has extensive background, having served as the Learning and Development Manager at Nedbank for 25 years, and with an additional 15 years of experience in the foreign exchange markets at both Standard Bank and ABSA. Anna-Marie brings a deep understanding of training needs, but also the financial industry. Then Carol Junius. Carol is responsible for quality assurance within Novia One. And Carol also runs the accreditations and ensuring the highest standards of education within our business. And again, this 25 years seems to be the golden number here. With over 25 years of experience in the education field, Carol's expertise and attention to detail really plays a crucial role in maintaining the quality and credibility of our programs. And that's why we thought Carol would make a really good participant on this program today as well. So you can see collectively between Anna Marie, Charmaine, and Carol, we have a dynamic team here with extensive experience in education and also financial services. I know a number of our participants here today are from the financial services background as well. And hopefully we can lean on their experience and expertise to help us navigate some of these questions. And again, as I said, this really is trying to address your specific questions. Before we begin, I really would kindly like to request our panelists to keep in mind we have 1.5 hours for the session. We have several questions and topics to cover, so we would really greatly appreciate it if our responses could be concise and really focused to provide really clear and succinct answers to some of the questions that we have. I would really like to start with the first question. Maybe Charmaine, you can pick up on this. One of the first questions that came out from our participants is, so what is the future of the CETAs and what does that mean for qualifications specifically from those CETAs?
Yeah.
Hello? Somebody's saying, yeah, I can't see, I can't hear. Have I got Charmaine?
Hi, Marilyn, I'm here.
Okay.
Would you like me to respond?
Yes, please.
So good morning to everybody. Lovely seeing people here and from when I was at Bank CETA. Always a pleasure to work with you. So I'm going to basically, as far as the question is concerned, I'm going to take it in 2 parts. The first part being that what is the future of the CETA? So all CETAs have been legislated to live until 2030. So that's legislation. So as far as the structure is concerned, that is going to exist until 2030. Then, and the rationale behind that is basically, first of all, in our sector, it is a strategic development that we need somebody to drive, and that is done through a CETA as such. We also collect funds, and we also distribute those funds for the development of skills. And so technically, always, as Bank CETA has been, is the champion. We look at the AQPs and verification, and also development of occupational qualifications and curriculum development. A lot of the CETAs have also provided for the occupational qualifications. So that's the various reasons that the CETAs will live for such a long time. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine. So then the question really around this is, so what does this mean then for the qualifications that sit under the care of those CETAs, especially given the fact that we now have specific dates that's causing a lot of confusion and a lot of anxiety in the market. We have June 2022, 2024, and then 2027. Do you want to maybe just unpack for us what this means?
Certainly, Marilyn. So when we look at those dates on the qualifications, you'll see that it states the top of the qualification, the registration date. So the 30th of June 2023 means that that particular qualification, which tends to be legacy qualification, is going to become deregistered. And in context of the word of deregistration, it just basically means that it cannot, the registration date cannot carry on. And the rationale behind that is the QCTO wants us to drive away from or move away from legacy towards your occupational. It doesn't mean that the qualification is invalid. And that goes to your second date, which is the 30th of June, 2024. So as a learner is allowed to enroll for the particular qualification until the 30th of June 2024. So registration end date is just a process, but the qualification lives and people can enroll until 2024. The last date is what we call a teach-out period, and basically it's a last date of achievement. So from 2024 to 2027, we basically have got 3 years in which to roll the qualification out, provide remediation and assessment. Thank you, Marilyn.
Fantastic, Charmaine. So just to summarize then, so students can still be enrolled until the 30th of June 2024, and the teach-out period then is until June 2027. Okay,
Correct.
great. Thank you. Thank you, Charmaine. Then I want to move over to the discussion around, I just had a question that popped up. Let me just have a look to see. Registration of what is ending. Can somebody just quickly explain, Charmaine, do you just
Yes.
want to give Jacques a little bit more detail? He's asking around registration of what is ending.
So Jacques, thank you for that question. So what we're saying is that when we say that the qualification has become deregistered, so it's not going to exist anymore. We're giving it a 3-year time period whereby you are still allowed to enroll learners and a teach-out period. But after the 30th of June 2027, that particular qualification is completely deregistered and will not be utilized anymore. And I just want to come in here as well. That doesn't mean that the qualification is not recognized as your scope or your arsenal of different qualifications that you've got.
Okay,
Linked to
Charmaine, fantastic.
Yeah,
great. There's just a bit of a breakup there on your sound. But fantastic. I think I really hope, Jacques, that kind of answers that question for you. And even for the students, we've seen some concern from students around this, where the question from the student is around, does this mean that the qualification that I have now achieved is no longer recognized and valid? It's absolutely valid. If you've achieved a national certificate in banking qualification, that qualification is still a valid qualification. It's still a recognized qualification. And just because of these dates does not mean that affects the actual qualification. Okay, now I'm going to move over. Carol, please switch
Hi,
on your
Marilyn.
video.
Yes,
Yeah.
I just want to come in here as well and just raise the point that when you achieve a qualification within this period, in other words, up until 2027, whatever legacy qualification you achieve, it gets registered on the National Learner Record Database. You are given the credits, you are given the recognition, and even if the qualification ceases to exist, you still have that achievement.
Fantastic, Carol. Thank you very much for that. And then, the follow-on question is, so what does this mean then for qualifications? Because we have now seen the work that's going on in the industry around the replacement of these qualifications that are referred to as legacy qualifications. And there's a significant amount of work underway from the QCTO to SACWA to the CETAs to the skills development providers. What would be really interesting, and maybe Carol, I know you have you and Anna Marie have done some work around this, is to maybe just talk us through how, from an industry perspective, stakeholders are being engaged and consulted to review the replacement of these qualifications. One, to ensure alignment with the industry needs, and then making sure that what we are creating is sort of fit for purpose, right? Carol, is that one I can hand over to you? Or is
Yes,
it Anna Marie?
certainly. Happy to take it. Anna Marie, pitch in whenever you feel the need to. So essentially what happens is that all the CETAs have engaged and is engaging with their relative stakeholders in their landscapes. And they are looking specifically at two things. The first thing is, what new occupational qualifications do we want to have that does not exist? Because the occupational landscape has changed dramatically since these legacy qualifications were initially designed, and you're going 20 years plus back. So that was the first move that many CETAs did, and you will see that there's quite a few qualifications with the QCTO registered that is brand new. It has no real context to any of the legacy qualifications. The second thing that the CETAs are doing is identifying legacy qualifications that still holds value to the industry. And they are prioritizing this, and they can do one of two things. If at all possible, they can simply realign it to the QCTO curriculum way of structuring qualifications, or they can totally redesign the qualification into an occupation. So that's your three ways: your standard way, your reconstruction way, and your realignment way. What you do have to realize that it is a lengthy process. Once the CETA has identified an occupational qualification that they want to design, they have to then submit that to the QCTO, who will do research to make sure that it is not a duplication of an already existing occupation. Once they're happy with that, they approve the design of the curriculum. When the curriculum is completely finished, it gets submitted back to the QCTO, who then approves, and then it goes to the SAQA for final approval and registration. You've got to keep in mind that all these bodies sit, I think it's quarterly, so any submission can fall just before or just after, and then there's this waiting period. But essentially, that is the process, and that is how stakeholder and industry engagement is ensured. So if the industry doesn't engage and the industry doesn't participate in this process, the industry is not going to get what they want.
Yeah. If I could add there, Carol, thank you. Just to give you an idea of the timeline, and we'll take one that we've done, the foreign exchange practitioner. It took us 2 years to do that curriculum, do the actual application and the registration, and it was only registered in 2021. So we should not wait, because 2027 is around the corner.
Okay. Thank you very much, Anna-Marie. I don't know if there are any specific questions around this, but there was a comment by Antoinette that says that, so this means that after this period, a new qualification has to be registered. And in fact, there is a lot of work underway from all the stakeholders to try and create replacement qualifications. What we also have to remember with some of these replacement qualifications, and I'm happy for you to jump in here, Charmaine, as well, is that some of the replacement qualifications may not come from the CETA where you are potentially sort of a main member of. So, for example, let's take the management qualification. It may now fall under the care of a different CETA where they will be developing a management program, and therefore does not necessarily mean an additional management program will be developed by somebody like, let's take, just for an example, the bank CETA, for example. So let's also just keep that in mind. So it's therefore quite important, I think, from an engagement perspective, that we look out for the notices and the gazettes that are coming out with what is on the cards, what are they developing. I know currently there is a new list out again, where they're asking for comments. So we just need to actively look out for some of those things to see what is in the pipeline, but also engagement within our frameworks and our stakeholders in order to be able to sort of keep in touch with what is out there. As a practitioner, where will be the main site? We can check qualifications and then submit intent for new qualifications. Who would like to take that one? Charmaine, maybe you?
Okay, thank you, Marilyn. So in the context of the development of new qualifications, it would always come, the process basically, it is something that is identified by a particular employer or organization within our sector. Once then they approach this CETA, the CETA will then complete the actual application form. That particular application form then goes through to the QCTO. So what the QCTO will do at that particular point in time is actually verify the qualification. So when I say verify, that basically means it is not a duplicate qualification, or it is not a part qualification of another qualification. So that initial process is basically looking at, is it valid, which NQF level, and is there something else that exists as far as the framework is concerned. So that is the initial application that goes through. Once that goes through, the CETA would get feedback regarding that, and then a project plan would be put in place as far as how we're actually going to roll it out. One of the reasons that it goes back to the CETA is the fact that the funding for the development of the qualification tends to lie with the CETA environment, the actual CETA structure. Thank you, Marilyn.
Very good, very good. Thank you, Charmaine. And so I think the other thing that we need to just be clear about is that, as Anna-Marie pointed out, there is a lot of work that goes into doing this. And this doesn't happen overnight. And I think, as Carol explained as well, there is a process where there is the CETA that works on this, and we work very closely, for example, with one of the professional bodies in developing the financial markets practitioner. Can I just ask everyone to mute themselves, please? The work that we did in the financial markets practitioner space, for example, is that you do the work, you develop the qualification, then it has to go to the QCTO, and then it has to go to SAQA. And all of this takes time. And then from a SAQA point of view, that also then has to come back again if there are any comments, and then it goes back to the QCTO. Maybe then it goes back to whoever was responsible for putting in the application, as Charmaine said, through the CETA, for example, or through the professional body. So this process takes time. So you need to think about the planning of this, and we spend an enormous amount of time thinking about how do we roll stuff out, how do we get stuff in the queue in order to make sure that we can try and meet the respective timelines as well. So I think we've talked a little bit around the collaboration that takes place. I just want to move on to the question around whether we believe that for some qualifications where there is not a replacement registered in time, whether there could be an extension that could be granted in terms of the registration. I don't know. Is there anyone on our panel who'd like to maybe take that one?
Marilyn, I would do that. So basically, at this point in time, if there is no replacement qualification, we've had different groups wanting to say, well, we can extend this. And the QCTO is actually very firm because they feel that they have re-registered the qualifications before, and they basically need to draw that line in the sand as far as, no, we cannot go forward. And I think, as mentioned with Carol earlier as well, is that there is an opportunity now to develop or reconstruct the existing qualification, but or go into a new qualification. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for that, Charmaine. So, and this is causing a lot of anxiety in the market around timing, around what's going to be ready, around, you know, we've heard about June 2024 coming up. And so you need to find the right place in order to be able to have a voice around what is being developed, how it's being developed, have representation at the right level. So one of the things that you need to think about, and maybe some of our panelists could maybe add to this, is where do people go if they're sitting here and they're feeling a bit lost and anxious about qualifications that are being developed and wanting to participate and give some of the input. So Carol, maybe you can talk about APIT a little bit, where we do some work with APIT and we give our feedback into APIT, where we try and move the process along. But do you have any other recommendations around where stakeholders could go to be able to make their voices heard, other than, for example, through people like ourselves who try and do this on behalf of some of our participants?
Thank you, Marilyn. APIT is, of course, one of the most proactively active people. They have many information sessions that helps position everything. And then from there, you can engage with the seater in which sits in your landscape and your specialization. It is a bit more difficult in the occupational landscape because, as an example, in the banking, if you're sitting with the banking, we were spoilt in the past. We could just go and knock on bank seater's door and everything was sorted. Now you end up having to go all over the place because you have so many vocations and occupations sitting inside your landscape. You could have to go to mixed seater because you have qualification concerns around technology and that kind of industry, or you could have concerns around management qualifications, which will end up sitting probably with services seater. So now you have to start knocking on many doors. But the best place to start, because that's where the real expertise sits, is with your industry related seater. So if you're in the financial sector, you can knock on Facet's door, or you can knock and bank seater's door. That's your starting point. From there, based on the feedback that you're getting from, if you're a practitioner, education practitioner, you can also start engaging with your clients. They will give you a very good indication of what kind of training needs they have, and that will give you an indication of which direction to go to. But until the dust settles, as I put it, you're going to have to knock on many doors. APIT is a nice one because it incorporates all those doors. So it's a one-stop shop almost.
Thank you, Carol. And APIT is the Association of Private Providers of Education and Training. So we are a member, for example, and they always have fantastic events like these to be able to kind of keep stakeholders up to date in terms of what is happening as well. Carol, I want to slightly change tack, but stay on this sort of the CTO sort of space. I want to talk a little bit about, there are full qualifications and there are skills programs under the QCTO framework. Can you talk us through this a little bit, just so that everyone can be on the same page in terms of how we think about the design of full qualifications and skills programs?
Certainly. Thank you, Marilyn. So what you have is a full qualification is a minimum of 120 credits. So when everybody started jumping in developing qualifications, we now have a few qualifications that's far less than 120 credits. QCTO is rebranding those qualifications, and they are now called skills programs. Skills programs is still, it's called part qualifications. Below that, you have skills programs. So qualifications and part qualifications still goes through the CETA, QCTO, SAQA pathway of registration and accreditation. Skills programs, on the other hand, minimum 8 credits. It must link to an occupation. If absolutely no occupation exists, then you have to have a strong motivation for the need of that skills program. The design around this skills program can sit with a training provider, but it must still go through the CETA. The CETA must agree with you that this is a skills program that is needed. Application form is completed and it is submitted to QCTO. QCTO still has to put the stamp of approval on it. And then you can also, we've had this question, if I've done 20 skills programs and I now have 180 credits, what qualification do I get? that does not happen. The only time that can happen is if all those skills programs are linked to the same qualification, and combined, they meet the outcomes and the requirements of the same qualification. And absolutely no occupational qualification will be awarded without the ISA. So that's a very important distinction between how we did things in the past and how we do things in going forward.
Carol, thank you for that. I just have two questions on that has come up. The first one is maybe just to answer Antoinette's question is what is 8 credits and what is it linked to an occupation? That's the first one. And then the second one from Jacques is, and we've actually dealt with this before, why are qualifications on their website, I suppose this is the QCTO website, listed under full qualifications, but many have less than 120 credits. And then also maybe we can talk about some of those qualifications where you have like 580 credits for a 1-year qualification.
Okay, so let me first answer Antoinette's question. Antoinette, what it really means is that, and I'm going to do a little bit of a scenario, a client, an employer can come to me and say that they would like to train the employees in a very narrow field, for example, just on processing invoices. So we could create a skills program where we teach them how to process invoices. It's a real need. The requirement is that it must be a minimum of 8 credits and that it does link to an occupation, because you always have underneath that the CAT principle where people must be able to accumulate credits. So that should answer, I think, Antoinette, your answer, a question around that. And then Jacques, your question is around the less than 120 credits. Originally, when the people started rolling out occupational qualifications and they started getting registered, I think there was a discrepancy in realizing what is a full qualification and what isn't. So there is qualifications registered with far less than 120 credits, and they appear on the website. However, if you as a training provider now apply for accreditation, they tell you that this is not a full qualification and it is going to be revised and reclassified. So rather consider them as skills programs from the word get-go. So they will start disappearing.
Thank you, Carol. Also talk about some of the experiences we've had around qualifications with, I don't know, something like 580 credits, as I said.
Sorry, my apologies. Yes. So the idea is that 120 credits equals 1 year, 240 is 2 years, etc. So what you're going to end up doing is, if you are looking at a qualification that is 240 credits, you've got to know upfront that you're essentially looking at a 2-year qualification. That's really what it means. And you will see there's one, the financial advisor is a classic example, where you have 500 and something credits, but actually that qualification is made up of 4 or 5 different part qualifications. So you could then turn around and do the first part qualification next year, the next one, the next one, the next one, until you have all 580 credits. And then you are a financial advisor. So in the first one, the first part that you're doing, you could end up being a short-term insurance specialist. And then so you progress until you get to the point where you have all 5 specializations, which makes you a financial advisor. So Those credits are really an indication of the duration. I saw that Charmaine had her hand up. Charmaine, do you want to jump in here?
Sorry, Carol. The rationale behind the credits as well is if you look at the compliance office, I'm just using that as an example, your workplace experience, nearly the value of the credits is at 120. So when people say, why are the credits so high? It's because you've got quite a heavy component as far as workplace experience that needs to be signed off. Thank you.
Those do affect it, absolutely. And you'll find that when you look at the structure of an occupational qualification, where you have your practical and your knowledge, it can be a low quantity. And as Charmaine demonstrated, you then have to spend many hours in the workplace to generate that experience, which contributes to the total hours.
So I think that the summary really is to actually understand the context of the qualification in terms of the breakup between knowledge, practical, and the work experience, which are the three components of these qualifications within the occupational framework, and also to be able to check for sub or part qualifications within those qualifications. And as Carol said, the in-seater has actually been very proactive in terms of rolling out some of their qualifications and having them registered and available to roll out as well. Talking about the practical element of the qualification, Anna-Marie, maybe I can come to you on this one. So the minute we talk about practical elements, it means that there is a workplace that is involved in this process. And so maybe then the question is, what are the registration requirements for the employers as registered workplaces from a QCTO perspective? And of course, obligations.
Yeah, thank you, Madeline. Sorry, guys, I had a technical problem, so I'm sitting here with Charmaine. Yeah, I think it's very important to understand that you have to be registered as a workplace with a QCTO. So I remember way back when I was still at the bank, we registered to be a workplace applicator at the QCTO. Thereafter, you can then be accredited at the AQP. I hope that.
Perfect. Thank you very much. And
so I don't know if you want to add anything.
Charmaine, anything from your side?
Sorry. Yes, Marilyn. So basically what Anne-Marie said is correct regarding the accreditation of the workplace experience. And also in the context of the AQP, sometimes the AQP will also accredit a workplace environment. So just wanted to add that.
Fantastic. So the example there that I think actually is very fitting that we've experienced is the financial markets practitioner, where SICE is the AQP for this, and they're responsible for the accreditation or the registration of workplaces as qualifying institutions. Let's talk a little bit around, Carol touched on this briefly, around the recognition of credit accumulation and transfer under the QCTO as well as RPL. How are they going to consider RPL and CAT in the qualification changes and updates? Charmaine?
Thank you for that, Marilyn. So the QCTO does recognize recognition of prior learning, and it becomes part of the actual qualification. So if you look at a qualification, you'll see that it actually makes a statement to say that this particular qualification can be RBL and will be recognized by the QCTO. The QCTO has also drafted a policy as far as RPL is concerned. The CAT, the credit accumulation transfer, just takes a little bit more work because you actually have to establish a matrix for a particular qualification. So that has to happen as well. Thank you.
Yeah, fantastic. And then, as Carol said, maybe we can talk about the ISA a little bit later. For where you have been recognized for your prior learning within the context of that qualification, you must still write the final
That
ISA
makes
as well. Okay, fantastic. Sure. I don't know who wants to take this question. I've got a question here from Johan. Johan says, to obtain a higher certificate as a financial advisor qualification within the CHE accredited space, you need 120 credits. Under QCTO, you need 515 credits. How will this affect our competitiveness? And with QCTO, you will need to do all the components to receive a similar certificate. How do we compete? And due to these different standards, I don't know who's going to pick that up.
Marilyn, may I pick this up, please?
You may know.
Thank you. Okay, so I need to make two distinctions. The Council of Higher Education is an academic landscape. QCTO is an occupational landscape, and you can't let the two compete. If you do the CHE accredited qualification, you're going to have somebody that is academically qualified. If the same candidate goes through the QCTO route, you have somebody that is got the academic or the theory and the knowledge, but has the work experience in a very practical sense. In other words, the candidate going through the QCTO route is workplace ready, can walk in and start working. You can't say the same for the higher education candidate.
Thank you, Carol. Johan, I understand your concern, but I think Carol is trying to nicely summarize that one. There was a previous question from Ketumetsu asking about why some qualifications have no credits, 0 credits on the FSCA website. Does this also mean it's not accredited? Ketumetsu, I don't know what that answer is. I would have to have a look at those qualifications to be able to come and give you an answer on that. And so maybe we can go back to the FSCA's website and maybe come back and give you an answer on that, unless somebody has a specific answer that they'd like to give. Then Glenn, the compliance officer QCTO qualification expires soon. Is there a replacement being done? Charmaine, do you want to pick up on that?
Yes, thank you, Marilyn. The qualification would be re-registered, and that would be the responsibility of the actual CETA. So when we look at the compliance officer, we're saying that it's now gone through its review period, and everything is okay. We don't want to change it. There might be 1 or 2 amendments as such, but we're comfortable with that, and the qualification goes again to be re-registered. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And so, Glenn, we went through a similar exercise with the financial markets practitioner, where, in fact, if you go and have a look, the financial markets practitioner's got 2 SAQA IDs. Even if you have a look on the list, and there's one that was the initial one, and then there was a second one that was developed because the first one that was developed was not seen to be fit for purpose, and so then it was redeveloped. And yeah, I see Natasha's on the line as well, because I think that's a very good example to actually be able to understand how the redevelopment of these qualifications work. Natasha?
So, morning everybody, morning Marilyn. I just wanted to add, AQPs in our case, because we are a professional body, and we have quite a close link to industry. As industry changes and the needs within an industry change, we then translate those into changes that need to come across or be brought across into qualifications, which is why there are 2 qualifications. The unfortunate situation is also that the first qualification, which is the ID 93603, I think it is, was supposed to be deregistered by SAQA. and SAQA cannot deregister it until they get an instruction from the QCTO to deregister. So that qualification is technically not active anymore because it has been replaced by 117238, I think it is. And the reason we do that is because there are changes in industry, and we're finding as qualifications roll out where the gaps are, because it's great to do a gap analysis, but sometimes the gaps only sort of come to the fore when implementation starts to happen.
Thank you for that, Natasha. And I must say, a lot of credit to SAIS as the professional body behind that qualification, because they were very willing and open to the changes that I think the industry sort of suggested in terms of fit for purpose. And I think that is another thing that I think is quite important as where almost the ownership of these qualifications kind of sit in terms of who's responsible for the curriculum, is to build those relationships in order to be able to have those type of conversations around these qualifications. I see a question here from Andrea. The QCTO skills programs are not currently registered on the NQF, and any indication of when they will be and have an associated SAQA ID number, because also this impacts the BE codes of these non-NQF registered program. And she says that, as my understanding is that they won't be able to be classified as a learning program E. Charmaine, I don't know if you want to talk to any of the skills programs and how the allocation of of those work. Charmaine?
Sorry, Madeline, she had to step out. Can we just move on to another question? We can come back to this one.
Fantastic. We will come back. Emmanuel asked, are we going to get an extension to some qualifications that have expired under services CETA qualifications? Also, is QCTO going to adopt all qualifications under CETA? And is there anyone that's going to be deregistered? I think the way, and maybe Carol and Anna-Marie, I'm happy for the two of you to speak to this. I think the way they've looked at this, Emmanuel, was there was a gazette that came out that said that all relevant legacy qualifications will be replaced by qualifications under the QCTO, but those ones that have been deemed as not relevant anymore, those ones will not be replaced, and therefore that is the work that is ongoing, which was part of our initial introduction, where there's a lot of work that happens with the various stakeholders around engagement, around developing qualifications that are fit for purpose for that specific industry, and therefore deciding which legacy qualifications needs to be replaced. I see, Charmaine, you've also joined again.
Sorry, yes, Marilyn, I have.
Okay. Did you want to add anything to Emmanuel's question?
No, I'm fine with that. Thank you.
Okay, great. Did you want to add anything to Andrea's question around the skills programs? The QCTO skills programs are not currently registered on the NQF. And the question really is there any indication of when they will be, and when will they have an associated SAQA ID, as they really impact on the BU scorecards and how these are classified from a learning program perspective? Any ideas on that, Charmaine?
Thank you very much. Marilyn, it's just all the group. Basically, what's happening is the skills program is taking slightly longer to be registered because it's a different entity, more structure to the occupational qualification. So if you also look at the QCTO website, they don't, sometimes as far as publishing, they don't publish as soon as possible. So I would say at this point in time, it's just a little bit of patience as far as skills programs are concerned. But yep, you'd be able to follow up with the QCTO.
Okay, thank you, Charmaine. Sometimes we must also just have a little bit of patience with the QCTO, and sometimes I share your frustrations as well. They have a lot going on at the moment in terms of being able to process all the applications that they're getting for accreditation and for new programs that are being registered. And in fact, they as much admitted to it, saying that they're really struggling with, they have a real capacity concern. And in fact, that problem is just going to get a lot worse as we're getting closer to June 2024, when more people are looking for, so what happens after June 2024. So there's a bit of pressure from their perspective as well. And then that pressure then extends into SAQA. And as Charmaine in a pre-call made a very beautiful observation, is that all of these organizations have not necessarily geared themselves up for the additional capacity that is required as well. I want to just move over to the question of learnerships quickly. So what is the outlook for learnerships under the QCTO? And because some have been registered as learnerships, some haven't been registered as learnerships. What is that process? How does it work? Who's responsible for registering as learnerships? Who's responsible to put in, the ask for a learnership? Charmaine, I don't know, could you give us a bit of clarity around that?
Yes, so Marilyn, if everybody just recalls that when the occupational qualifications came out, the basic stance was that if it was an occupational qualification, it is a learnership. But the QCTO has now changed that mandate to say that any actual occupational qualification must be registered as a learnership. So the process is just the same. The application would come from the CETA. They complete a application form. This goes through to the QCTO, and once the QCTO, it goes through to GHET, registered with GHET, and comes back that whole process again. And if you go onto the QCTO website, you'll see all the learnerships that have been linked to qualifications. Yes, thank you.
And if I could just add to that, because there was a question pertaining to the scorecards. So how does the banks and other institutions then report the QCTO qualification on their scorecard? It's exactly the same as they would have for their learnerships.
Yeah.
Okay, very good. Thank you. Thank you, Anna-Marie. And then following on from that question, there was another question around, so what does this mean then from a tax perspective? Because learnerships are obviously linked to the 12H, and I think the way to answer that question is that the learnership tax deduction comes to an end in 2024 as far as the tax guides are concerned. That is a ruling that has to come from SARS as to whether there's going to be an extension on that specifically. So you would have to look out, and we'd have to see what SARS says in that respect. And then if they extend that date beyond 2024, the assumption then is that all those programs that are then registered as learnerships, according to the classification of Section 12H, would then be able to qualify, but only based on an extension, I would say, from a SARS perspective. Okay, let's talk a little bit around this, the theoretical and the knowledge aspects of this, Carol, in terms of the balance of that in the construct of QCTO qualifications, and how they look at theory, knowledge, and practical skills in the learnerships, and how this is expected to evolve within this specific framework. Carol?
Thank you, Marilyn. Right. So essentially, the occupational qualifications are done in, most of them are done in 3 sections. The first one is knowledge, then practical, and work experience. There are some qualifications where work experience is omitted, but the practical skills are still there. Most of these are because of safety or health considerations. So it's rare, but it can occur. Knowledge and practical training sits with the training provider. Work experience sits in the workplace itself. Although the training provider will need to be cognizant of what happens in the workplace and put that final portfolio of evidence together, because it is the training provider that must issue a statement of results for all 3 sections that then gets submitted to the AQP that is responsible for the ISA. This also means that the training provider has to report to QCTO as well. And the one thing that we have been told is that the intention, and I've experienced this, so I would like to say that I agree with the principle, is that the ISA is not there to test whether you can copy and paste information. It really is a practical evaluation of whether you can do this work. There's different formats in the ISAs. It depends on the AQP, and it depends on their assessment centers and their approach as approved and endorsed by the QCTO. Something else that I can add to this as well around the ISA itself is that the AQP is responsible for designing the ISA question paper. It is for QCTO to approve, and only then can the ISA run that examination. So the principle is that it is a national examination. And I think that sort of sums it up, Marilyn.
Great, thank you, Carol. I don't know, would anyone else like to add anything to this ISA? Natasha, you must probably have the most experience that I can see on this call here with the ISA. I don't know, do you want to add anything to it? Sorry, I'm picking on you, Natasha.
No, that's fine. I just needed to find my unmute button, which is obviously a problem for me today. The QCTO is responsible for approving the, for lack of a better description, the structure of the ISA. They do not have to approve every ISA exam. So as the AQP, we set an ISA twice a year. They do not approve our exam, but we have to construct that exam according to our curriculum guideline. So that's where the QCTO gets involved. They then, of course, then do a whole lot of quality assurance on the results of the exams. They issue the certificates. But as long as we are setting an exam according to the structure that we said, then sorry, it's the quality assurance specifications, then we're fine. So there is no need for the QCTO to actually approve each and every ISA exam. Carol was correct that it is a national exam. So there is no other AQP for the financial markets practitioner, and we set that exam and we run it nationally according to demand.
Very good. I don't know, Natasha, if you want to maybe help us pick up on this one, or if anyone else would like to. You know, one of the stress factors in the industry is the fact that we may not have all the ISAs ready when students are ready to write it, because some of the AQPs are not in place properly, not structured properly. How are we going to deal with that? With that challenge that's coming? I'm happy for anyone to pick up on that. I don't know, Charmaine back at the desk? Natasha?
I just wanted to clarify, when you said the AQPs are not ready, did you maybe mean the SGPs are not ready?
No, I actually mean the AQPs in terms of, you know, we have some qualifications that we've rolled out where we know that there is a challenge with the AQP in terms of for a particular qualification where they need to get themselves ready with the exams, the ISA, etc. And that seems to be a bit of a a bit of a challenge for some of the newer AQPs, because I think the professional bodies who have done this for a long time, they're all set up and they're all structured, etc. But we do see that as a bit of a bottleneck in terms of new qualifications that have rolled out. And we're very fortunate with FMP. You are structured and we've done this and you kind of have all your ducks in a row. But there are people in the industry where we've seen this a bit of a challenge. And then the other one that Johan is mentioning here is that the AQP only schedules 2 to 3 exams per annum, which restricts the flexibility of students, especially those that are close to the date of first appointment. Natasha, I really don't want to put you on the spot with this question, but I'm really happy for anyone to pick up on those questions.
So if I could suggest an answer, if there is an industry body, the industry body should maybe engage with the AQP that is problematic and try and assist them or offer assistance. Because the difficulty in the STPs trying to do that is that then the Chinese wall is broken and there's almost no difference between or it looks as if there is a lack of independence where the AQP is concerned. So that would be the only concern that I would have if the STPs were to try and engage. But I do think if there's an industry body or an industry forum to maybe try and use that to engage with the AQP, or alternatively start setting one up where a number of key employers then say, look, these are the problems that we've got, and work with try and work with the AQP in getting it right.
Yeah. Fantastic, Natasha. I think that's very practical advice in terms of how one could actually approach that. Okay, let me just see. Jacques, I'm happy to come back to you on your question. I'm just cognizant of time. We have about half an hour left. We've talked about learnerships now a little bit, but there was one question that actually came from a student. And Carol, maybe I can ask you to pick up on this. And the question basically said, what level of educational recognition do learnership qualifications hold, and how are they likely to be recognized in the job market going forward? I think, first of all, we need to get the definitions right here. Carol?
Yeah, I think this is something that we spoke about earlier as well, is that we need to move, and there's a lot of education and training needed. One of the reasons why we're having this session, we have to move away from the legacy mindset where we have an NQF level mindset and that progression from 4 to 5 to 6. In the occupational landscape, we are moving occupationally. So it doesn't matter if you're a highly qualified engineer, you're going to start rock bottom if you're going into nursing, and it's got nothing to do. So you downgrading yourself from a level A to a level 2 because of the progression between. So the important thing is that all the new curriculum in the occupational framework has got a pathway and an alignment, both horizontally and vertically. So it very clearly shows you within this occupational field, you can progress up, and you can, to a certain extent, progress this way. But it's not as wide as what the legacy qualifications have to be, because you could be jumping completely across to something else. And then you have to look at where that is. So when you're looking at the entry-level requirements, look at the occupational requirements that is clearly depicted in the curriculum document. And it's, again, like I said earlier, it doesn't matter when you got a qualification. If qualification at any given point has been registered on SAQA, whether it now disappears or not, that qualification still has the value. It's still sitting on the NRD. So it's sort of a two-way question, two-split question. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Carol. Jacques, just on your question, let me maybe just quickly answer it. The 12H is obviously the allowance under the tax code for learnerships, and the reference that was made to April 2024 is that there is what's called the sunset clause, and it comes to effectively comes to an end on the 1st of April 2024. So you can claim currently in the current tax environment, you can claim up to 2024 for that. And so the question then was whether there will be a renewal, or the discussion was then, will there a renewal from SARS or an extension of that Section 12H. But Section 12H, of course, as we remember, was really an incentive for employers to be able to deal with unemployment in South Africa. And so I think that will obviously be a key consideration from their perspective in terms of the extension around that. Let me just move on to a question around funding. There's obviously concerns with the changes in the landscape around how are we going to get funding and what can we anticipate in terms of how it will operate. And Charmaine, I'm going to maybe hand this question over to you. And, you know, all our participants here are, or a large number of our participants here are significant contributors to the skills development levy, the funding pool. And so what's going to happen to the funding? How will the funding landscape be affected? And what implications will this have for employers with the changes that are coming?
All right. So thank you very much for that, Marilyn. So when we talk about funding, once again, what would happen in a CETA environment is they would look at the regulations and they may revise it. So the funding will always be there for your mandatory, your discretionary, and your special funding. So as far as that is concerned, I would advise go onto the CETA website and see if they have now actually updated their funding regulations.
Yeah, if I could add something there, please, Marilyn. I spoke to Bank CETA during this week, and I was told that the funding is changing a little bit. It's no longer like a pivotal funding. They will open it only once a year, but it will stay open for a few months. So quite right. Apologies. What Charmaine is saying, contact your CETA.
Okay. With the qualifications moving sort of now under the ambit of the QCTO, and I know we sort of say, you know, contact the CETA. Does this mean that there will be a change in terms of how we maybe envisage the role of the CETA as the distributor of that either mandatory or discretionary funding? Do we see that changing at all? I know what you've just said, Anna-Marie, but I'm trying to just maybe create a little bit of clarity around this from a market perspective.
So, sorry, Marilyn, can I come in there? So in the context of the CETAs, because over the last few years, there has been a significant improvement in the collection and distribution of funds. The QCTO at this point in time, the main focus is the establishment of the council, ensuring the framework is working, ensuring that the occupational qualifications are out there. Whereas when you look at a CETA, it is the funding, is the distribution, but it's also the other concepts of verification, moderation, generation of certificates as such, that right now the QCTO needs to work on its capacity, whereas the CETA already has it.
Yeah.
So that's a personal opinion. Thank you.
And while we're on the funding point, can I talk about the closeout report on and the ISA?
Yes, please.
All right. So basically, in the past, funding was the balance of the funding was done once the institution sends their closeout report. With the ISA now, the learners still have to do the ISA. No funding will take place. Only once the ISA has been completed, there's a 12-month period for the training provider to then basically apply for funding with a closeout report. Bank CETA told me that if they see that they are going to run out of the 12-month period, they can apply for extension. So it's vitally important for the institutions to remember the balance of the funding will only be done once the ISA has been completed.
Okay. Any questions? Yeah. No, thank you. Thank you, Anna Marie. I mean, that is definitely a question for people. And then, we need to kind of fit it into the schedules of the ISA exams as they come, and being able to kind of match that to the requirements from a CETA perspective in terms of how the distribution of funds will work to be able to get that closeout reporting. Okay. Maybe on some of these we have more questions than we have immediate answers. Okay, thank you for that, ladies. Let's quickly move on to the next question that we have. How practical hands-on experience and work-related experience be incorporated into the learnership delivery models, recognizing the importance of work-related experience in the job market, where traditionally learnerships focus on providing learning experiences. However, to enhance competitiveness in the job market, how can work-related experience be integrated into learnerships in the future? I think this comes from one of our students. Charmaine, do you want to pick that one up?
So thank you for that, Marilyn. So just to re-emphasize or what Carol said earlier is that when you look at the learnership, the knowledge, practical, and the workplace experience of the three critical components that the learners actually highlighted here. But once again, saying that once you have workplace experience and you have it signed off, it is your basically it's experience that you have worked in the workplace already, and you've signed it off and you've delivered. So the concept of doing a presentation on anti-money principles is you've done it. So when somebody looks at your CV or such, they would look at what you've done and the different components that you've actually had workplace experience in. So that's very valuable as far as the market is concerned. I think that, just personal opinion, that maybe sometimes people need to be more educated on the actual concept of the learnership, and its very generous benefits. Thank you.
Thank you, Charmaine. Thank you very much. There are a couple of comments coming through on the chat. There's one from Antoinette that says that the tax division has confirmed that they do not foresee a further extension. And I think this was on the 12H. Thank you for that, Antoinette. And then there's a question from Benazir that says there was talk of the CETAs taking over the ISAs and encouraging us to be ISA providers. Is there any news on this? I don't know. Who wants to pick this one up?
I think that Natasha would be your best candidate.
Natasha,
with all due respect, I'd hand over to Natasha. Thank you.
So there was something very similar the last time that the 12H deduction expiry date came up. And what took place there was National Treasury did a round of talks with the CETAs, and they looked at the number of learnerships that had been taken up, the number of tax deductions that actually had come through. And that was the determining factor in whether to extend the 12H income tax deduction. Given the fact that we are in such a bad economic state, even though the feeling with tax practitioners who are a lot closer to this than we would be, is that the 12H deduction won't be extended. If we look at the fact that there have been so many other grants and so many other tax sort of concessions, if you want to call it that, from SARS and from the National Treasury for employers and for the workforce, I think we're probably in a 50-50 situation. Again, it will depend on how much information and data the CETAs can provide and SARS can provide. But that was the basis for the extension the last time.
Yeah. Natasha, thank you very much for that. I kind of concur in that a little bit in terms of, I think the jury may be out on whether it's definitely not going to be extended. And I think, if you look at unemployment in South Africa and you look at the benefits that some employers have, or how this has been an incentive to employers to be able to provide internship opportunities, learnership opportunities, working opportunities for these students. I think there is a real case to be made for the renewal of that, but we'll have to wait and see on that one. I don't know if anyone, Benazir's questions around, I know that some of the SETAs are doing the ISAs. I know InSETA is doing the ISAs for some of their qualifications. Ben, I don't know whether, I'm not quite sure about encouraging. I think your reference there may be to employers to be the ISA providers. And I don't know if anyone has any specific news on that. Anyone? Carol? You're on mute, Carol?
There we go. Sorry, I'm also losing that mute button. They must make these buttons very big on the screen. So the talk about SETAs taking over the ISAs is really where the SETAs would delegate the AQP functionality. The SETAs, I know, and I'm saying this with gentle touch, is kind of like scrambling to now set up that functionality. It's not something that they've ever been involved in. So they are reaching out in the industry for the subject matter experts and contribution towards this infrastructure. So that's where it's at, and they are battling. I know that they are, and also to further confuse it, the QCTO is now also redelegating some qualifications that is sitting with one SETA to another SETA. And Benazir, I know that you are quite aware of this with the financial markets practitioner that is sitting with bank SETA that now, not the financial markets practitioner, sorry, the risk practitioner that is sitting with bank SETA that now has to go to FACET. And that leaves the ISA hanging in the middle of the air because there's no AQP yet. Bank SETA doesn't want to do anything because they know it's moving to FACET. FACET's not doing anything because they're waiting for it to come to them. And this is where the industry must just monitor it closely and start when you putting pressure where you need and cooperation with the governing bodies to help them. It's not just about, oh, they are so bad. Oh, how can we help? Thank you
for that, Carol. Natasha, you have officially become the fourth member of this panel. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Natasha Faustino, CEO of SITES. Natasha, on this question of, I sort of have a similar question, and you've obviously been through this experience. What happens with programs like, and so somebody's given like the compliance officer and the risk practitioner, and we've obviously had it with FMP, where there is a renewal of the qualification, and you now have to write the ISA. Will you write, and the registration end date before the renewal, there's sort of a question mark around it. Will people go through eventually writing the ISA under the updated qualification or the existing qualification? And you've obviously got experience of this. Just maybe explain to the audience how you went through solving for that.
So my experience has always been with the professional bodies that I've worked with, and I'm not going to use the ISA because the ISA came in afterwards. Has always been the reason that there is a teach-out period, is that if there are learners in the system, that you don't have to disrupt the learning of the learner and make them change from, and the reason there's a new qualification is because there has been more than a 50% change in the curriculum. So you don't have to disrupt the learner and put them back by having to relearn things and then end in 6 months or 8 months when they could have ended in 3 months' time. So that's the reason for the teach-out period. Most professional bodies, and I'm going to then work with them in the context of SDPs and AQPs, have either then said, we are not registering anyone on the new qualification until the old people are finished, or the other way around. No one is registered on the old qualification, and we'll only take registrations on the new qualification. And they wait until all the learners on the old qualification are finished, and they will then stop examining on that qualification. In SACE's case, when we changed and updated the curriculum, we just happened to be fortunate and fall in a space when there were no learners in the system. All the learners had finished on the old qualification, and then the new qualification came in. But otherwise, the transition of carrying through the old until the learners on the old are finished and then moving into the new is very seldom, well, not seldom in my experience, it's never been that way. But I know of experiences where it becomes very, very murky if you are trying to move people from an old qualification onto a new qualification because of the disadvantages, possible disadvantages to the learners. My experience, also not from a QCTO perspective or a CETA perspective, but from CIMA, is when they have changed qualifications, they have always made sure that the learner is in a better off position than they would have been. So they don't disadvantage the learner, and they make sure that the learner has a long lead time. So they say to them, for example, you only have 2 more exam sittings to write this particular exam. Otherwise, you have to move to the new curriculum. And if you fail it, we can't credit you. You have to start from scratch. So there are a number of ways that this can be managed. But usually it is end on the old one and then only take learners onto the new one, ETP9 concurrently, but don't mix the two.
Natasha, thank you very much for that comprehensive answer. Charmaine, here's maybe one for you. Can the learning provider, the SDP, also be the ISA provider?
Marilyn, thank you for that question. That has, over the past, it's always been there. If you are the training provider, you can't be the ISA provider as well, because it becomes a conflict of interest. So they want more autonomy as far as the ISA is being done.
Yeah, one could refer to that as insider trading.
Thank you, Anne-Marie.
Thank you.
So, how are we going to solve for the capacity around the ISAs? Charmaine and Anne-Marie, do you have ideas? You either on mute or you are.
Yeah, no, sorry, we're battling to find that mute button.
Yes, once again.
So basically, the industry needs to come up with all the questions for the ISA, because at the end of the day, it's for their qualification. And I can use the Forex qualification as an example. The banks will have to make use of their SMEs and draw up the ISA questionnaires and then take it from there. Because if I do it, exactly as I'm saying, I created that curriculum, material, it would totally be unfair.
Okay. There's a slide up on the screen. Who's going to talk us through this one? And maybe we move over to the next one just in the interest of time. We've got 5 minutes left. Carol, who's doing it?
I think Ms.
Carol?
Sorry, mute button again. This really just talks to the conversation we had earlier and just now, where the pathway for the learner and as it relates to the ISA. And what you've got is the occupational qualification where the training provider does the knowledge and the practical and oversees the workplace so far as the portfolio of evidence. At this stage, we can also have RPL. From there, it goes through to the AQP where the ISA sits, and then the reporting and the moderation via the QCTO and the final certification. The next slide is a little bit more detailed, if I can have it, please. My apologies. Who's got the slides? Can I have the next one, please? There we go. This is a little bit more of a detail where you can see all the stakeholders being involved in the learning path. You've got your QCTO that looks after the certification, the accreditation. The QCTO will use AQPs to help with the accreditation and monitoring process. The ISA sits with the AQP. The student then is linked really to the SDP, where they do the learning and the work experience with classes, mentoring and coaching that is joined into the workplace. And this is really where the workplaces need to be cognizant of the different focus, if I can use that term. So in the past, the student did what work they needed to, and they could create a little log and everybody was happy. Now you have a very definitive and prescribed and described work experience module and its obligations. And the workplace is an integral part of that, and they really have to participate in that. And then from there, the student gets the statement of results, which then leads them to the AQP registration for examination that goes back to the QCTO and ultimately sits with the certification. Thank you, Marilyn.
Thank you, Carol. I'm sure we could, anyone would like a copy of the slide, you can maybe just ask Carol or the organizers for a copy of it. Again, we are coming to the end of our session. Carol, this was most useful, that slide. Thank you for sharing that. Ladies and gentlemen, we have 1 minute left. Let me just see. Benazir is asking, so effectively we as employers need to be 1, registered as workplace experience providers, 2, okay, where's it disappeared to now? Maybe a QCTO learning provider, and 3, a ISA provider, question mark. Charmaine, Anna-Marie? And Benazir is wondering when is she going to do a day job when she's doing all of those things?
Yeah, sorry, Charmaine stepped out. Apologies. Yeah, so obviously as an employer, you've got to be registered. Let me just try and get to a question in the chat. We did. Oh, there you are. Sorry, I'm just trying to find this now. Okay, so just repeat the chat.
Yeah, I'll repeat it for you. So Benazir says, so effectively we as employers need to 1, be registered as a workplace experience provider, which,
yes,
you know, I think is right, yeah. 2, maybe a QCTO learning provider, and 3, an ISA provider.
Yeah, so 2, yes, if they've got in-house qualifications that they want to do. The ISA, you can only be that if it's not one of your programs.
Okay.
So
I don't know why you would want to be the ISA provider, Benazir, but there you go, Natasha.
What she might refer to is provide the questions to the ISA.
Yeah.
Yes, that I agree.
Yeah. Natasha?
I hope that answers it, Benazir.
Thanks, Anna-Marie.
Yes, thank you.
Okay.
I just wanted to add to that, to just make sure that workplaces are aware that there might be different accreditation criteria as a work.
Natasha, we're struggling to hear you a bit.
Can you hear me now?
A little bit better, yeah.
Okay. Workplaces need to just make sure that, or we understand that there might be different workplace provider requirements for different qualifications. Because for each qualification that you offer, you need to be a recognized or accredited or approved workplace provider. And it's about making sure that you have the right practical skills available to the learner for that qualification. So you could be registered multiple times as a workplace provider, but for different qualifications.
Yeah. And you would then have to do that with the AQP responsible for
Correct.
that qualification, correct, right?
Correct.
Okay. All right. Any other questions as we really have come to the end of what I think has been a really interesting 1.5 hours? Any final questions from anyone? And if you want to put your questions in the chat, we can also come back and try and answer some of them later. Jacques got a question: as a skills development provider, what are the major changes we can expect with specific reference to changes that the QCTO policies brought to the Skills Development Act, the BEE Act, and the BEE scorecard? Jacques, I don't know whether we have a full definitive answer on that specific question, but if there is anyone on this call who would like to answer that, I'm happy to open the floor for that answer. I think that's where we still need to do quite a bit of work. What we do know, Jacques, is that where these qualifications are registered as learnerships, then they qualify like all the other programs as a learnership, which is what we have implemented. Any other additional changes on top of this? I think we need to do a little bit of work on it, and maybe that is a topic for our next discussion as a webinar. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like to thank you for giving up 1.5 hours of your time. I really hope that we were able to answer some of your questions. I know some of them may have created more questions for you, but you know, that's part of critical thinking, right? Asking different questions and asking the right questions. So if you do have any other questions, pop them in the chat. We'll try and find a way to answer them, or we'll try and see whether maybe we could come up with a second event to be able to try and deal with this. If anyone would like a specific session around the workings of just the QCTO, then we're also quite happy to do that for you and your team as a way of kind of just closing the knowledge gap on that one. But, you know, Anna-Marie, Charmaine, Carol, and of course, Natasha, thank you very much for your contributions. And thank you very much to everyone for your questions. It was great hosting you once again, and we look forward to seeing you at the next webinar. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen.
Guys, quickly switch on your cameras. We would like to take a picture for our webinar event. Please, the ones that still left on the call, there we go. Beautiful faces. Hello, Angela. Yo, I haven't spoken to you in ages. Renee, hello, guys. So nice to see you. Hello, Sons. There we go. Bianca, how's that for your photograph?
Thank you.
Thank you. Natasha, thank you once again.
Look after yourselves. Bye-bye.
Thank you. See you soon.
Okay. Bye.